Ja, herzlich willkommen, a warm welcome to all the guests here to our next presentation in the LINKWITZ Parlor. We have the pleasure to find someone who can tell us something about a digital audio format that is a really alternative to tape. It's really something that some people call an analog or a digital storage for an analog format. So the format is analog in that kind that you can have a DSD output and just connect the headphone and you will hear music. That's not possible if you connect it to a CD player. So the output format is called SDM, signal density modulation. The popular name is DSD that you might know from the SACD in the former times. But now, since then, the format has developed from the DSD 64 to double, 128, and quadruple, 256, and that's what we mostly use now here. And it goes up to 1024 even, theoretically, if you have the process power, the storage space, and so on and so on. But it's not, the reason for this format is not just to be different, but it has a purpose. The purpose is to have it as close to the original as possible, as close to the master tape as possible. And for that one, you need also to answer the question of post-processing. Post-processing, if you look in the web, everyone tells you post-processing is not possible for DSD. So it's partly true. DSD 64 used to be being processed with the Sonoma software that was developed like 30 years ago, but it's limited to single DSD 64, the usual, the former SACD format. And Jussi has developed a software that can do it with much higher rates in DSD and is now something that people consider as state-of-the-art in maintaining as much fidelity as possible in post-processing of digital files. For analog, we know everything, how it's going, how it's working, how we are adding noise to it in some parts. But for digital, without going PCM, that's a real challenge. And I'm happy to have someone here who knows best how to do this. And I'm happy to have him presenting this speech. Welcome, Jussi Laako of HQPlayer.
Thank you. So I don't have a projector here, so I will try to explain these things, and I may share my slides later. I gave this presentation already earlier in HQPlayer remotely. So I start telling a bit who I am and what I've been doing. So I've been developing both hardware and software for quite a long time. I designed my first DA converters in early 90s, and then I started developing HQPlayer in 1998, and it took me about 10 years before it was ready for making it public. And then in 2008 I started my own company for HQPlayer software, and I released 1.0 at that time to the public. So since I've been developing it quite a lot, I believe it was first player software to play DSD files from computer. I think it was first to do real-time DSD upsampling. First to do digital room correction for DSD without doing sample rate conversions. And first to do real-time analysis like spectrogram and similar for DSD content. and also things like DA converter corrections for the DA converter errors and for example volume leveling for DSD sources or replay gain. So for typical recording, there's a lot of issues on the ADC side. So when converting from analog to digital, in normal, all the modern AD converters are delta sigma type. So they convert the analog to data that is similar to DSD. And if the recording then code is going to PCM, it gets converted from that bit stream to a PCM inside the ADC chip usually. And since the ADC doesn't have very complex DSP processor inside and it cannot have inside the chip very powerful DSP processor, they need to make it pretty simple in that conversion. So for modern ADCs like for example AKM chips, it's usually 2-bit output from the ADC stage, and then it's converted. The most common recording formats are like 96 kHz or 192 kHz PCM for Pro Tools or similar common PCM recording solution and digital audio workstation. Then there are more higher end solutions like Pyramix. So then the bit stream gets converted to 352.8 kHz PCM, and then that is recorded and stored, and you can edit it in Pyramix and mix it, and you can also do such things. But then the original idea of DSD is that instead of converting that bit stream from the ADC to a PCM and record it and store it, instead we just take the raw bit stream straight from the ADC. In the past, it just took too much storage space, and it was inconvenient and non-practical to edit it because it requires so much processing power to do the editing. So PCM was most used, and since PCM is most used also for delivery format, especially in the past for like book and similar, then it was for like convenience that it was converted down to PCM and then editing down there where it's a light operation from processing point of view. But the conversion in ADC has a lot of errors. For example, there's some amount of aliasing, so the higher frequencies that go above half of the sampling rate need to be removed when the sampling rate is converted down. And at that point, if the filter doing that is not good enough, some of the high frequencies are folded down to the audio band. Anything that is left above the half of the target rate is then folded down, and that causes errors in the signal. And it's especially in the highest frequencies near the sampling, half of the sampling rate, since the filters are not so steep and the attenuation is not so high. For example, the popular AKM chip has 85 decibels of attenuation. If you do similar conversion in HQPlayer, you have about 300 decibels of attenuation. And in, for example, the AKM chip, if you record 44.1 kHz PCM rate, then the aliasing goes down to 18 kHz. So the whatever goes is above 18 kHz in the output signal is mixed with some dirt coming from the frequencies above 22.05 kHz. So usually, for example, from drum hits or similar, you have some frequencies folded down. Also, this PCM conversion causes time domain and ringing because of the digital filter there. and that becomes part of the PCM signal as result. And that's also one type of error that happens with the PCM recording. Later we can alter that and partially remove that ringing, and we can correct part of the errors, but it's still not as good as not having those errors in first place. When you record in DSD, you don't need to run any steep low pass filters to remove high frequencies, because half of the sampling rate even at DSD 64 is 1.6 megahertz. So you don't get that high input frequencies. So first order analog low pass is enough to remove any such things. And another source of errors in ADCs is there's usually DC blocking digital filter that removes DC from the input, and that will also cause errors and some roll-off in the lowest frequencies. And then of course in ADCs analog components and such cause distortions and other errors. And then when you edit this material in PCM, it's easy of course, and you have a lot of options to use plugins and such. Then in the normal playback chain, if you deliver it as PCM, then in normal typical playback chain, if you don't use something like HQPlayer, you instead send it straight to a DA converter. Then the DA converter does up conversion of the data to the final sampling rate, which is usually like 5.6 megahertz or 11 megahertz, and then it applies also delta sigma modulation again to turn it back to similar data where it started from, which is a bit like 1 bit or 8 bit or similar output data that is finally going to the actual digital to analog conversion section. If the editing is done in DXD, for example in Pyramix, then it's done at higher PCM rate. It's 352.8 kilohertz PCM rate, and you can still do a lot of similar things. Maybe you don't have as many plugins or like other tools, but you can still easily edit it. And the sampling rate is higher, so you have much less of these issues that you have with PCM, but still you have sort of unnecessary conversion to PCM. You have some loss when you convert it to the PCM data, and then it needs to be converted again back to the bit stream for actual DA conversion. You could run it through some R to R ladder that goes up the output if you want, but there are not so many such DA converters on the market, and they have their own problems with linearity and such. That's why delta sigma converters were developed to begin with. So instead, now we can do also in HQPlayer Pro. Originally I started HQPlayer Pro because Tom Caulfield from Native DSD was asking me that he wants really this kind of tool. That can I make it? He said that he doesn't care if it's hard to use and whatever. He just wants to have such tool so that the signal path is more pure. So then I agreed that okay, I will make such tool so that he can use it, and then I improved it over time to some extent, but it's still nowhere near as easy to use or friendly as Pyramix. So it takes quite a lot of effort to do like mixing and mastering with it. So you can pretty much just run mixing through it from multi-channel to stereo output, for example, without doing any rate conversion. So DSD in and DSD out, and everything done at the same sampling rate, or you can increase or lower the sampling rate if you want. But throughout the path, all the processing is done at the source sampling rate. So even if you output to DSD64, the processing is done for DSD256 recording at 256 speed. This of course takes a lot of processing power, but now we have powerful CPUs and we have powerful GPUs. And HQPlayer Pro can also use NVIDIA GPUs to do the processing. So it can be done in real time. For some of the things, like still for like if there's a lot of tracks, high sampling rate, DSD256, it may not be possible to do it in real time, but still at like reasonable speed. So it may take twice as long as the playback time to process it, or 3 or 4 times, but it's still not like days or weeks to do it. There's inconvenience doing it because you cannot do all the things. There's EQ, mixing, level adjustments. You can add delays, use convolution engine for reverb and similar, but it's still like limited what you can do compared to Pyramix. But if you want to make a pure DSD like production, then that may be feasible way to do it, and I have later some demo tracks that have been made this way. And typical workflow is also that Pyramix is used to adjust the tracks, like cut and do like come up with a sort of session that what needs to be done, what are the mixing levels, and how the channels are mixed.
Yeah.
And similar are done in Pyramix, and then these parameters are transferred to HQPlayer Pro, which then does the processing for it. So you have sort of some of the convenience of Pyramix, because Pyramix allows you to do simple things like cutting pieces or moving pieces without converting to DXD, so this can be done in pure DSD. And one other thing that is possible to do in HQPlayer Pro, which some recordings are using, is that some are recorded in MS format, where you have the mid and side channels, and you can then run that in convert that such recording made in DSD to normal stereo output recording in DSD. That's also one possibility. And it can process straight to the final delivery format, so you don't need to do any intermediate format after the mixing. So you can output even to MP3 straight from DSD if you want. It just gets converted as final result to the MP3 if you want. And also in normal HQPlayer, so then when you have DSD256 delivery, for example, you can, with many DA converters, you can play it like bit perfect straight without involving the DA converter's DSP. Or it at least goes shorter path through the DA converter. It needs to do less work on the data. So it optimizes the chain and improves the fidelity overall for the end result. Okay, then I have a few demo tracks. These are there's 2 versions. These are made by Eudora Records. The recordings are made by Eudora, and I got these from them and Native DSD, and then Tom Caulfield at Native DSD made the HQPlayer Pro processing. These are stereo mixes of multi-channel recording, and there's 2 versions. One is done in DXD in Pyramix, and one is done with HQPlayer Pro, and both are original DSD 256 multi-track recordings, and the output is stereo DSD 256. So you can compare. There are 2 tracks that I can now play. So, and then after the tracks, I can answer questions and such.
Okay. So we hear 2 different tracks. The first, or one of them is mixed in Pyramix, and the other one is mixed in HQPlayer.
Yeah.
So one of them has the advantage of staying with the same sample rate, and the other one had the filters in.
Yeah,
is that correct?
I had conversion to DXD and then back from DXD
Okay.
to DSD 256.
So one should be closer to the original than the other.
Yeah, the first one is DXD and so made in Pyramix. shorter ones so that you can more easily compare. So I played a little bit over 1 minute of these tracks. So do you think there was some difference?
Yes.
Okay, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it. Please raise any questions.
You have a question?
Then it took us a little time. I also have to be honest, I heard about that you already did this at the Expona, and that people heard it, but I thought, nah, it must be very subtle. It's a huge difference.
Yes.
And I was sitting here in the corner. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'm curious how people actually also respond to it.
Because maybe I don't know. It's, how did people also hear difference, and in what way? Is there anybody?
Well, the second ones were more naturally sounding. So the harshness was gone. It was really brilliant. Where do we get these kind of recordings?
Native DSD is selling these. So these are available from Native DSD. Tom Caulfield is doing quite a lot of work for a number of labels, and then to make these kind of mixes. I think they label those as pure DSD or something like that under the Native DSD store. So there's a number of tools and more coming, but it depends on the label. If the label delivers such mixes, or if the label asks Native DSD to make those and is able to provide the source files suitable for and the instructions so that they can do this kind of.
And the output from the analog digital conversion is always DSD?
Yeah, in these cases, yes. It's
Okay.
the recording is most typically DSD 256, but there are also some DSD 64 or DSD 128 recordings.
And here's a sound engineer of Sound Liaison of this label. He also does DSD 256 recordings.
Now, yeah.
Now.
It's very short because
Yeah.
they challenge me.
Yeah.
And I'm again, I already did some small experiments, and I have the same experience with the difference. It's how is this possible? And the strange thing for me, I worked for such a long time in PCM, and for me, yeah, that's what it is. You know, I try to get the best out of it, and
So
now
that's
suddenly
what
somebody say, yeah, but you can open the curtains. There's a world behind it. And but that's very exciting also for me. But yeah, but to be honest, it's also not so simple. But if you also with the software, I think when you do it a couple of times.
Yeah, it takes some
Yeah, you
time
can
to
use
get
it.
used to it.
It's
And
very different than the normal workstation you work, of course, on. Because all the modern workstations is a sort kind of representation of how it was. You know, you have a digital mixing console with faders and panning and EQs, and now you have to really say, okay, I want my first fader on a minus 60 dB, and the panning should be that kind of things more. Like your programming.
It's more manual.
Yeah. But the result is amazing. It's
If you want, we have after Jussi's presentation and after your questions, we're gonna play a song that Franz just recorded last December with a one stereo mic recording in DSD 256, and I think no post processing.
No.
We just put it out again as it was recorded, like simple as same like direct cut in vinyl maybe. So there's no post processing, just record it to DSD file and we play it back as DSD file later on once your questions have been answered.
Yeah. But because I realize now it's all about technique and you know, but I think finally music is about emotion, and you must touch, and that's also where I felt a difference. How is this enter your actually your heart, and So I'm curious about the future with Jussi software.
Clarify, the first version was technical. What different to the second one?
The first version is made in Paramix, which means that it's converted to 352.8 kHz PCM from a DSD 256, and then
First
converted.
version was PCM converted and back to DSD.
Yeah, and then back to DSD, and the second one was processed from DSD 256 straight to DSD 256 without any rate conversions in between. So it's all processed at 11.2 megahertz.
Well, but the common knowledge is that there are no loss if you convert from PCM to DSD and back. So that's what I learned some time ago, that there's actually no huge difference. You have no signal loss. Everything is just the same. But obviously not.
Yeah, more you put it through like more complex process, there's always some amount of difference. How much there's a difference, it depends, but there's like, and also in Pyramix there's limited resolution. HQ, even if you process that kind of PCM in HQPlayer, it would use higher precision inside for processing. But yeah, it's not like completely lossless that you would convert a DSD to this PCM and then back. So it will have some processing loss always there. So that's the main difference. The idea is to reduce the amount of loss on the pads.
More question?
Maybe I can ask, we're talking about the same recording, of course, and I wanted to ask how different was the mixing process between those two softwares, because we're using two different softwares, right? Someone mixed those mixes, someone did those mixes in a similar way, let's say.
Yeah,
how similar was the way?
Yes, so the mixing is done with the same parameters in both cases. So first, Eudora has made the DXD mix in Pyramix, and then they sent the source files and the mixing parameters, so the channel routings and the mixing levels to native DSD, and Tom then processes and with those parameters, the same source files, to the DSD 256 output in my software.
I was a bit amazed that the second version sounded a little bit louder or more dynamic.
Yes.
And I was doubting if it was due to the mixing stage or due to
The levels are the
version.
same.
Yeah.
All the mixing parameters are the same and the levels are matched. So,
Yeah.
so the output level is exactly the same in both
So
tracks.
the only thing to compare is the format.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Also, in my ears it sounded like there was more air molecules between me
Exactly.
and the sound.
Yeah, and I think that is exactly that kind of information you throw away using PCM.
Yeah.
I never realized that.
The most common comment about the HQPlayer Pro mix, which is made in the, straight for DSD, is that the sound has more air, so it's like less confined or like flat, and there's more space around. That's the most typical comment that people make about this. For example, from Oxford.
Yeah. The recording I did, the musicians also respond very positive to it. Really said, whoa, now I hear my instrument for the first time. I hear my instrument like, so that, but they accept, of course, they accept the PCM recording can also be beautiful, but that's the sort kind of where you're, okay, that's, apparently this is the way it sounds, but now you come with a new format, and but that we also had it with, when we went from 44 kilohertz to the higher bit rates, that also was opened some things, but this is another step. Yeah, it's interesting.
And now it's upon us, the users, to request that from the recording companies.